Okay, so hello, everybody, and welcome. As we wait for some more people, I'm hoping that that it's only my machine, just in case this gets taped and everybody sees Celeste Crusoe across it rather than me. That's why we're having this trouble. It could be my computer. But anyway, welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kathy Pagano. And if I was going to introduce myself, I would say first and foremost, I'm the mother of four amazing adults now. My daughter's birthday is today. She was born in 1970. And all of my kids are doing well. And I think that's what I did best in this world. But I'm also a trained Jungian psychotherapist. I went to the C.G. Jung Institute in Zurich and trained as a dream therapist. I'm an astrologer. I don't know if I call myself an archetypal astrologer, an evolutionary astrologer. Basically, I'm a counseling astrologer. I help people figure out who they are. And also, I'm a coach. And I like to say I'm a wisdom coach. I especially work with women. I've been teaching wise women's salons now for quite a while. And this talk is based on a book that I originally wrote in the 80s for my master's thesis. And back then my advisor said this should be written in gold ink, but I could never get it published because right by the time I got done, I got divorced. And then when I tried to get it published, the publishing business wasn't publishing goddess books anymore. So we'll talk about it a little bit there. So anyway, welcome. And so I'd like to explain what I mean by the goddess and how she is making a comeback after many years in exile, okay? In ancient times, the goddess was worshipped all over the world. And from what we know, it was pretty much a partnership society. It wasn't, sometimes we've been taught that, back in ancient times when the women were in charge, men were their servants and they killed them and used blood sacrifice. But I will say that women don't need blood sacrifice. We bleed every month. It was the men that picked up on that and thought, oh, blood must be holy. Let's kill something. And maybe we'll have that same power, because men have always had a fear of the feminine because we are powerful, but we've been put to sleep by patriarchy, okay? Our patriarchal religions haven't been very kind to the goddess, and they've tried to shape her expression to their needs and in service to their powers. And in trying to shape and control the goddess, they also shaped and controlled women, how we were viewed, what was expected of us, how we could act and behave, but most importantly, how we viewed ourselves, especially in the last 500 years. Okay, we women have been vilified, and we were the cause of all sin, and men couldn't control their own instincts. And so obviously it was our fault because we dress the way we dress or do whatever we do. And they had, for a long time, they had absolute power over us. And in many ways, they still have that power. And I always say women were the original slaves of patriarchy. Patriarchy has also shaped how we think about the world and how we see the world. Patriarchy has rejected, at least until recently, right brain feminine consciousness, which is the imagination and the feeling and our intuition. Some of you older ladies will remember how many times we said that doesn't feel right, and we've been told, oh, you're crazy. And during the Victorian era, women were actually put in institutions, and they were told that their wombs were moving around, and that's why they were a little crazy. We've been told that the imagination, which is the voice of the goddess, is just for children, and that and once again, our intuitions and feelings are crazy because they're not based in facts. Now, the wonderful thing is we've seen with the Keystone Pipeline, the Native women, they said, no, we can't have this. And there's a prophecy about the black snake and how it will wreck our water and our life. And based on those intuitions and feelings, they started a whole movement, and the men came and helped them. And patriarchy totally has used the imagination for its own purposes. And the worst part is they've used it to sell us things. Okay, they've used it in advertising. I think Sigmund Freud's son was one of the first guys who really got it down and used and manipulated us, because images go right to our heart. And so they've used the imagination against us. And they've also colonized our imagination with so many movies that are so violent. And we begin to say, well, why do we have such a violent society right now? And it might be because we have a lot of violent movies that everybody watches, or violent video games, because the imagination is where creation comes from. We know that now. The physicists tell us that now. Okay, the quantum field is there. It's like it operates like in particles and in waves. And back in, I don't know when it was, the 90s or maybe in the early 2000s, the people came out with The Secret, and then everybody started doing the law of attraction. But one of the things with patriarchy is it swallows all of our good feelings. So what happened? The law of attraction became, oh, I need $1 million. Oh, I want a better house. So it was used for patriarchal purposes. Okay, it swallows it. The secret isn't, oh, let's put our intention out there and get a wonderful house and make $1 million. Our imagination is much more important than that. And that's where the goddess and the return of the goddess comes in. So anyway, a long time ago, when we lost sight of the goddess, we women lost our freedom, we lost our knowledge, and we lost our wisdom. And men lost their ability to trust, love, and desire, I think. In the West, the god, in the East, in India, they still have all their wonderful goddesses and gods. But for the West, which is really controlling the world's mindset, the goddess came and went in many different forms, but not so much after they burnt the women, the witches, back in the 16th and 17th century. But her return now is on a totally different scale, because the planet is in crisis and humanity is faced with a collective initiation. We have to take a leap in consciousness and evolve out of our adolescent mindset into our maturity as a species. It is time for us to take our place back in Mother Earth's biosphere, which is to be stewards of the earth. Now, since I wrote this in the 80s, so many things have happened. So much of this has come into consciousness in a good way, not just in a patriarchal way, but only the goddess can birth a new world. Okay, only the feminine gives birth. And because the goddess is the opener of the way. And in many ways, we might say, well, why do we need to see her as a goddess? Because she is sacred. This is a part of ourselves that is sacred. And if we just see it as, oh, it's my intuition, oh, it's my imagination, we don't give it the power that it deserves. Okay. Everybody that I have worked with in the last 40 years in therapy, I started to say I was a mother, and I was an astrologer and a Jungian therapist and a counselor. And everybody that has come to me, especially there were women more than men, we want to find our purpose. Okay. And often it's been, oh, I want to open a new age center. I want to do this and that. And all of that is great. That's a good purpose. But that's still in outer doing. Okay. It's about what can I produce in the world? And often it went along with, I need to make money. But the goddess is returning because it's about being our best selves. It's about getting in touch with what Jean Houston, who's a wonderful psychologist and a teacher, talks about the possible human. What is our full human potential, not our technological potential? Because the technological boys are trying to steer us towards what I call the Borg mentality. If any of you are Star Trek and Captain Picard followers, the Borg come in and take over humanity and make us machines. And it seems that that's what people like Bill Gates and all of these people, Zuckerman, they want us in their technological regime, you could say. And unfortunately, we can't let these corporate overlords of ours seduce us into this perspective of the world anymore. That money's more valuable and important than love and community. That selfish individualism is better than community and family, and that we are isolated rather than that we are interconnected. And it's so interesting because they want to control that interconnection on the internet, right? Rather than letting us develop what I call our internet, which is our interconnection with Mother Nature and with each other. And all of you, I'm sure, have hooked into that internet when you have that psychic hit. Oh, I know who's calling me right now. Or, oh, I'm thinking about someone. Oh, and they're thinking about me. We have that potential. So anyway, right now, once again, come back. Why is the goddess returning in our time? Once again, Jean Houston calls this jump time. We're living in jump time, a time of rapid cultural change and evolution on a worldwide scale. And there's so many ways we can talk about it, and I will later about the changing of the ages. But I thought first, let's talk astrology, okay? Because astrology is making a big comeback right now. And I do want to bring up the point that there's this amazing series that's going to start on Tuesday on the internet called The Changing of the Gods, based on Rick Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche. And Rick Tarnas, I'm not going to explain too much, but he wrote a book and he showed cycles and how the cycles of the planets resonate with what's going on in the world, okay? And they're going to talk about that. And the two planets and the cycle they're talking about specifically is Pluto and Uranus cycle. And I talk about this because we had a new one starting in the 60s. And for those of you who lived in the 60s, you knew what a wonderful time that was to be alive, okay? And Uranus and Pluto came together in the 60s. They had a conjunction in the sign of Virgo, the Virgin and Mother, the Virgin with the harvest, or the mother and child, okay? Because the mother needs to see what she gives birth to, okay? So Virgo is really the sign of the harvest in many ways. And since then, on one hand, the first world's capitalistic society has totally changed our planets, and therefore, all of society. For those of you who don't know astrology, you know that I've talked about this for many years. Uranus is the planet of revolution and freedom. And Pluto is the planet of evolution and power, life and death. So the planet of revolution and evolution came together in the 60s. This man, Rick Tarnas, traced this back to Spartacus back in pre-Christ times in the Roman Empire. Every time those two planets come together, either together or in a 90-degree square or in an opposition, they create revolution. And those two planets that came together in the 60s were in a square, which is the challenge of overcoming obstacles from 2012 to 2015. And for those of you who were alive back in the 60s, every single thing that we worked on in the 60s, or we thought about and thought we were making progress with, came back into our society's awareness. And we realized, well, we haven't really done the work. And that's where we are right now. But also in the 60s, the goddess came back to us big time. And for me, it was when I saw that picture of our beautiful planet floating in space with the moon underneath the camera, okay? The people on the moon took the picture, and there was the Earth floating. And I think for that moment, I think all of us, humanity, understood finally for the first time that we were one world, okay? There was a connection, and there was the goddess Earth connecting us, okay? She also came back to us in the arts and in literature and in music, in what we used to call the occult practices of tarot and astrology. And most importantly, she came back in the women's liberation movement. Now, during those transformative 60 years, she came back with that fight for equal rights in the outer world. And unfortunately, when we first went into that outer world, we had to shape ourselves to the men once again. Okay, we couldn't go into business back then and say, I have an intuition that this isn't going to work. What happened is everybody went in, all the women went in, and we were forced to conform even more to patriarchal ideals. Okay, and it's made us what I call the father's daughter, for the masculine in all things. But a lot of us also went in the other direction, and also many of those women who went in and became captains of industry have left that and are also on this search. And the rest of us we said, well, I'm going to go inside and discover who I am as a woman. If I am free, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a woman, a free woman? What does it mean to be me? And the change from the 50s and 60s to when I was young to now is enormous. And I don't know if these young women even think in these terms anymore, but it's so important for us to know our history. So as women search for our freedom and unique being, okay, the goddess was there waiting for us because she never really left. She's been in our female bodies. I know a lot of people try to say bodies aren't important, but they are. Okay, for too many millennia, for many thousands of years, men have colonized female bodies. And it's time for us to discover what those bodies are when they're free. Right before this talk, I went online and my dance teacher, my beautiful Persian dance teacher, Banafshe, I danced, I got embodied, okay? Because that's the other trouble with patriarchal religions. They all say the earth is an illusion or it's evil or it's bad, just as women's bodies are evil. Let's all go to heaven. So that we have these crazy men killing people thinking they're going to get virgins in heaven. We have Christianity, flagellating Christians in the Middle Ages, flagellating themselves because the body was so evil. And so we've slowly lost our embodiment. Look at us, we're on computers all the time. We don't move our bodies. We don't live in our bodies anymore. We live in our heads. We're a bunch of talking heads. And so with the goddess coming back, it's about embodying ourselves again, okay? We have to reclaim our bodies from patriarchy's dark and negative projections. We need the goddess energy to flow within us and within nature. And I think we're finally getting back there. When I was young, I guess I always was a goddess girl, even though they were, I thought men had much more freedom to go and do things. I watched my brothers get in way more trouble than I ever did. But my love of mythology opened me to many forms of these ancient goddesses. For some reason, I had a 9th grade teacher and he made me teach a whole month worth of mythology. I don't know how the heck he figured out who I was going to be, but in 9th grade, I was in charge of a whole section of teaching on mythology. Now, maybe he saw it in me because when I always used my imagination, okay? And of course, I always was a dancer. And so I would dance to music, and especially the story of Scheherazade. Scheherazade, which I'm not going to go into right now, but I do talk about it in the class that I'm going to do in March and April, was this amazing storyteller who saved the women of her land by telling stories. And Rimsky-Korsakov has beautiful music, and I would dance around and embody this passionate, wild, sensuous woman. I also was open to the sensuality of Aphrodite along with that. But of course, my upbringing told me, nope, put a hold on that. You can't do anything with that. My intellect understood the inner meanings of the stories because I love stories, and stories and music spoke to me. I learned way more about life from stories and music than I ever did from school, if you will. My intellect, though, it was funny because I went to Catholic school until 6th grade, and we had to take tests on the mass, and I always got like 110 extra credit. And I thought I could do this more than the boys. I should be a priest. I told my family that I was going to be the first woman Roman Catholic priest, but thank goodness, thank goddess, I didn't do that. And I am a priestess of the goddess Sekhmet, and it's much more liberating, let me tell you. I also got in touch with the goddess because when I was studying dreams and the magic of the unconscious, because that's where the goddess lies. Jung knew that. Carl Jung spoke of the unconscious as the divine feminine. So as I'm working on all of this and discovering how to listen to the voice of the imagination in my dreams, I came and I did my master's thesis on the divine feminine. And I began to ask myself, why in this day and age is the goddess, the divine feminine, returning to us now? And that's been over 50 years almost of the goddess, returning and, and coming to us in different forms. One of the things that the Easterners talk about is that the goddess is Maya. And I think the West does too, that, 10,000 forms, we can't get lost in it, but that's our job. We're we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Our job is to explore those images. So the goddess comes back to us as the spiritual guide or the creative muse or archetypal energy, and quite literally in goddess worship. And all of you women know that as soon as we leave our churches and synagogues and we try to get in touch with the divine feminine, we're outside doing moon rituals and doing seasonal rituals, because the goddess is of the earth, and that's part of it. The divine feminine is yin. It's very responsive energy. It's about beingness. It's a quest for our true selves, because our power lies within us. And patriarchy tried to make believe that power is vested outside of ourselves, because they wanted to control us. The church did. Our society right now is doing that. But that's why I believe COVID is a blessing. We've been forced to go inside into this meditative retreat from the world, all of us. And we've given ourselves a chance to realign ourselves with our own values. And that's big in the next year, our values. Astrologically, okay? I'm not going to get into it because we could go down so many rabbit holes, okay? So the feminine awakens within us, okay? And because the women and the earth have had a long association, there's renewed interest in Mother Earth because of the challenges that we're facing with climate change, but also the poisoning of our soil, our food, our air, our water. I've said this for decades. I will say it for decades. What society poisons its own people? What society poisons its own food? There's a wonderful movie I just saw on the Shift Network Film Festival, The Seeds of Vandana Shiva, a beautiful Indian woman who has started a whole project about saving seeds against Monsanto, and people are understanding that it's the soil that, as our food, our food supply system, big ag, has destroyed the soil, which is what holds carbon. If we renew our soil, it will grow plants that will catch the carbon. So while we, look at these, we have to stop using fossil fuels, more than that, we need to start replanting our earth. So anyway, it's so synchronistic. I love it that this is the time when the goddesses come back. And it's so important for our futures, because we are the grandparents of the future. And what we do now affects our children's children for 7 generations. But we're not there yet. Like one of the, we're living in what many people call the changing of the ages. There's so many wonderful ways of describing it. We saw that back with the Mayan calendar in 2012, that it wasn't about the end of the world. It was just about everything recalibrating and beginning again, and perhaps letting us know that we are in the beginning of a new 26,000 year cycle. We have the Hopi prophecies. They are the wisdom keepers of the Native American people, talking about the 4th age giving way to the 5th age of illumination. where the two-hearted people, Westerners, masculine thinkers, have to go through trials, but that we can come through and we will live in an illuminated age. Carl Jung and astrologers talk about the changing of the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And Jung says the Aquarian age is when we will live the archetypes consciously. And that's being conscious of all of these energies and how they work in us. But just in terms of these astrological ages, it's so important to know that that we're just in the headwaters, okay? Like the Piscean age is receding and the Aquarian age is coming into being, but we still have to deal with the tests of the Piscean age. The Piscean lessons are love, to live with love and live with compassion, to understand that our job is that we have a union with the source in each other, and with the sheer idea that we are spirits having a human experience. Isn't that what Jesus's resurrection was all about? It always got me annoyed. Here I am back saying I should be the priest or the pope of the Catholic Church. I did tell my parents I was going to be the first woman pope. I'm in 6th grade at the time when I'm saying this, and they're laughing at me. And then I found out there was a woman pope, Pope Joan, and they killed her when they found out. But anyway, instead of focusing on his Christ's death, they could have focused on his resurrection. It would have been a totally different world. But because they focused on his death, they went into the whole sinner and redemption. And now we've created a Western society that is a death society. We have created death all around us. Crazy, right? So as we turn away from this patriarchal, and I would say Christian, corporate, capitalistic, dominator society, we have to look within ourselves and embody those Piscean values. We have to get rid of this childish ego that goes, I'm going to use the secret to get $1 million. We don't need $1 million to live. And if all of us had to work hard to get $1 million, there would be no land. The earth would be dead, and we would be dead. One of my friends thinks that there are aliens controlling everybody, okay, evil aliens controlling everybody. But you begin to think, well, I can understand why someone might think of that conspiracy theory when these big corporations keep destroying the earth. Or when you get the bozo guy, the Amazon guy, the 3 guys that sent up rocket ships into the, for 5 minutes. Why aren't they buying the Amazon and willing it to the world? Why aren't they putting their money into the earth? Because these men are still thinking that out there in heaven is better than down here on earth. And that's why the goddess has returned. And that's why women and the men who support us and who get in touch with their own inner feminine, we're the ones who need to change the world, okay? And that means we have to live in a more spiritual way. We have to let our light shine, okay? We have to live more consciously, because the return of the goddess is all about a renewed balance between our head and our heart. Albert Einstein said that we have so twisted things that we've made the servant the master. And he meant by that our rational thinking. It's our foundationally, it's our imagination. We are constantly imagining. Our right brain is constantly processing what comes to us in images. And so our job is, how do we connect and how do we find the goddess within us? Okay. As I said, I wrote my book originally in the 80s, and I understood the return of the goddess, but then I thought, well, maybe I don't. It took me 35 years to learn how to figure it out. When I was trying to sell the book to one agent said to me, but what is this about? And when I explained it to her, it was like, nope, I don't get that. Now they get it. Now they would get it, right? Bodies do matter. The goddess is waiting to incarnate in us. and to free us from that patriarchal colonization of not only our bodies, but our minds and our hearts. And I think that we do this through images and stories more than anything. So there are many goddesses. And if any of you have worked with goddesses, you know, we have Artemis to teach us how to be sort of wild and free and virginal. My goddess Sekhmet is the fierce lioness in the fierce lion goddess of Egypt. And back when I was at the Young Institute, I would dream of her often, and I was quite shy. I always tell people, you wouldn't have known me back then. I don't talk like this now. I was very unsure of myself. But for a whole month, I imagined, like I used to when I danced to Scheherazade, I imagined as I walked through Zurich, Switzerland, that I had a pride of lionesses around me. And after a month, I was talking, my head was up, I was centered in my own power for the first time in my life through the use of the imagination. When I would teach back in the 90s, I would teach women who run with the wolves. And, but also, if those of you back then, if you remember Marion Zimmer Bradley's The Mists of Avalon, so many of the women said to me, I want to be Morgaine. And I'd say, well, then you have to step into her. You have to become her. You have to feel her energy, okay? The imagination that we tried to leave in childhood, that patriarchy is so afraid of, that she keeps saying it's only for children, it's only for children. And if you watch children, you know that they live in their imagination and it's real for them. And it's interesting because Jesus said the kingdom of heaven, to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to become like a child. We have to learn to use our imagination, but in a different way, not use it for profit, but connect to it so that we can hear what Mother Earth and what life itself is trying to teach us. So anyway, there are many goddesses we could turn to, and I think we do. And even in this image that I'm about to talk to you about, we can use all of the goddesses, okay? There's not just one. But, you know, if you look at the gods, statues of gods and goddesses, they always show their gifts, okay? Athena, you know, has her shield and her helmet because she's strategy and she's masculine wisdom. Knowledge, I would say knowledge and strategy. She's not really feminine wisdom. Aphrodite is always unclothed, okay? So and then you have the Eastern goddesses holding lotus flowers and flames and different things. So we can tell their attributes by how we see them. And this is the image that I think is so important for us now. And of all the different stories about the changing of the ages, it comes in the Christian end time story. Now, the difference between all of the other stories of changing of the ages and the Christian end time story is that it falls into that false dichotomy of some people are saved and some aren't. It goes back to the Jewish belief of being chosen. And that's very much part of Western masculine religious belief. Some people are chosen and some are not, okay? Wrong. But anyway, we know that's wrong, okay? But in this story, in the book of Revelation of the end times, the apocalypse, the unveiling, if you really read it from an objective point of view and not a, I don't want to say fanatical, delusional, but sort of point of view, it really points out how bad our Christian society is. A lot of times right-wing Christians will talk about Antichrist. It's not a person, it's our society. If Christ is the idea of that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, then our society has totally trashed that idea and said it's only material, okay? Our society is very flat earth. Only facts, only rational thinking, it's only material world. They don't want to acknowledge the soul. And so if you're going to talk about, in a Christian sense, Antichrist, we need to talk about Western capitalism, what has taken over the world. But let's get beyond that because that's not what I want to talk about. of all the things in that whole crazy book, which is based on Jewish apocalyptic thought and astrology and all sorts of strange things, there's one image that sticks out that none of these Christians talk about, but it changes the whole scenario. And it's this. It says, a portent appeared in the heavens, a woman clothed with the sun, standing on the moon, crowned with stars, in labor, giving birth to the Savior. Isn't that what we saw when we saw that picture of our Earth there floating in space with the moon underneath and the stars around? But it's also a woman. So this image is a woman, which means it's incarnational. The feminine incarnates, it wants to be embodied. It's a goddess and it's the earth. And this is the image of the goddess that I think is the most important for us to meditate on and work with, because this is the image of the goddess as wisdom. What do we need right now more than anything else? We need wisdom to deal with what's going on. Do any of our leaders ask for wisdom like King Solomon did? There was a good king. Okay, if you know the story, he went when he became king and he went and prayed to God, and God said, what do you want, Solomon? I'll give you riches, I'll give you power. And he said, I just want wisdom. I want to be a good leader for my people. And God said, okay, since you asked for that, you get everything else. And that is the truth. When we have wisdom, we get abundance. And wisdom isn't about us saying, I have an intention, I want it. It's about us opening up to the flow of energy and listening. Okay, and that's the image of us of the woman standing on the moon. The moon regulates life. It's the rhythm of life. It's the energy of how things change and grow and develop. And so standing on the moon says we have to take our standpoint on what the imagination is telling us. To be clothed with the sun is about, now we have to understand and give meaning to what I'm sensing. To be crowned with stars is to say, I have a spiritual mission. And we could say we can learn that from our astrology chart, because our astrology chart is just the map of what we've chosen to do this lifetime. As a soul, we choose to come in at a certain time, in a certain place, to a certain family, to learn lessons that will help us achieve our soul's purpose. I have 4 kids, and they would get so annoyed at me because I was not a regular mom. And when they would get annoyed, I would say, get over it. I was here first. You chose me. I look back and think, why did I choose my mother? Okay. But if we believe that, if we believe that we have chosen this time and this place and our circumstances to work through any soul issues to become conscious, this is our great initiation. You have to be initiated to understand our purpose. We can't just walk around and say, yeah, my purpose is to make a lot of money. My purpose is, because our main purpose is to have joy and is to live well. Okay, our purpose is not to go out and make money for some corporation that doesn't need any more money. Our purpose is not to be slaves to what the corporate mentality wants us to be. Our purpose is to be free, to freely choose things, to be wise, to be connected to Mother Earth, and to have joy. I saw another film on that film festival with the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu. What a bunch of characters the two of them were. They kept laughing and saying they were tricksters and kissing each other. And they basically were talking about our job here on earth is to live joyfully. And that's what the goddess can bring us. So having an image of the goddess to go next to the image of the gods that we were brought up with, the god that we were brought up with, the two, and of course we need the masculine and the feminine, okay? This gets convoluted, but patriarchy has a feminine side, okay? It's just subservient to the masculine. What we want is a partnership relationship, not a father or a mother, but two equals. And those two equals are the Christ, which is we are spirits, and Sophia, or Lady Wisdom. When we know that we are spiritual beings, then wisdom can speak to us, and we listen, and we live a wise and beautiful life. So anyway, I'm not going to go on any much longer because there's so much to say, and the rest of what I'm going to say is in my class. I am giving a class starting on March 6th. It's the day that Venus and Mars come together for the third time. They came together, I think, for the second time sometime in this past week. Now, the moon regulates the energies of life and represents our unconscious, the creative imagination. Venus represents, and to me, Aphrodite Venus is sort of the main form of how we incarnate wisdom, because she's the goddess of the body and of love and of accepting our sensuality and our sexuality. So even though I'm sure the Christians would go, scarlet whore of Babylon, it is Aphrodite or Venus who embodies soul. As a matter of fact, she is the initiator of soul in the ancient myth of Psyche and Eros, which we will talk about in my class. So I've just had an old person's brain freeze. Anyway, I'm going to go on from there. So the class is starting in March 6th. Venus and Mars are coming together. The whole idea of the feminine coming back, or the divine feminine coming back, is that we will give rise to a whole different way of doing. Once we own our being, the divine feminine, our doing will change. We've been so concentrated on doing, very masculine, okay? The phallus, the masculine phallus is outward. The feminine womb is inward, right? And we've always, for the last 2,000 or 4,000 years, it's all been about doing. Now we have to go within and be, and we will find a new way of doing, a feminine way of doing. And that is the child that this woman clothed with the sun is giving birth to, a more feminine way of being in the world, of doing in the world. So before I end, I would love to say a little prayer. This is the charge of the goddess of wisdom. Whenever you seek wisdom, come together in love and trust and learn of me, who am living wisdom. You who search the mysteries of the earth, the secrets of air and darkness, the mysteries of blood and fire, the silence of the uttermost stars, come unto me, and I'll whisper to you in the depths of midnight. Approach me in the sanctity of silence, and as a sign that you are free from fear, you shall bear your soul to me. For fear has no place in my nurturing mysteries, and that which you seek of me will destroy you if you fear it. For I am the dolmen arch beyond which stretches the mysteries of infinity. I am the silence before birth and after death. I am the clouded mirror in which you scry your own soul. I am mist in the twilight, the vast and starry sky of midnight, the shadows on the moon. All things come to me in the end, and yet I am the beginning of all. I meet you at the crossroads. I lead you through the darkness. My hand is the hand you will grasp in the passage between worlds. To the true seeker, I bring knowledge beyond mortal comprehension. For you, of you, shall I demand the uttermost truth of all that you are. And in return, I shall give you all that you may be, all that I am. For my wisdom is beyond the ages, and knowledge of my secrets is power over self, over fear, over death. I demand of you nothing that you cannot give, for I am the mother of mysteries, and inasmuch as you know me, so shall you learn to know yourself. So mote it be. So I am going to open up this, and before we end, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please mute yourself and even come on, and we can look at each other. And if there is no questions, then we will end.
Me and my camera cover. Kathy, I wanted you to speak more about the class, if you're going to use the book as a guide, and if everybody has the book or needs to get the book. And one other thing about what you spoke on earlier was Pallas, when you said she's not feminine wisdom, which I'm curious if you could expound on that, because I usually say she's our unique genius, but from a feminine standpoint. So I do consider her feminine. Why do you not?
Well, originally, you see, a lot of the times when people have been writing about the goddess, like Jean Bolin, she's a Jungian, but her book on the goddess in every woman was all patriarchal. It was all about, patriarchal things. Like every time I would open Hera, she would go, oh, this is the jealous wife. Well, if you really study the mythology, Hera was the full moon. She was the perfect one, and she needed her partner to perfect her. So she is about partnership, but she's not the jealous, raging wife. Okay, that's what happened during patriarchy. So what happens when you invoke the perfect one? You invoke an equal partner. So in terms of Athena, Zeus, there was a goddess named Metis. She was a goddess of wisdom, and Zeus swallowed her. Okay, well, these Greek gods, they kept swallowing people. Okay, their children, people, whatever, because they didn't want them to have a life of their own, right? Just like The Secret. Okay, The Secret came out, and in many ways it was true. But what happened? Patriarchy swallowed it. Instead of setting intentions or the law of attraction, right? It was, oh, I'm going to attract a lover. I'm going to attract money. I'm going to attract a job. Patriarchy swallowed that beautiful secret, okay, and spit it out. So Athena gets born out of Zeus's head. So it's masculine wisdom, which is more strategy, okay? And in the play Orestes was the son of Agamemnon, who went to Troy, but he killed his daughter to get there, okay? So when he finally came back, his wife thought, screw you, and killed him, okay? You kill my daughter, I'm killing you. And the son killed the mother. Now, in the old days, okay, in ancient times, the Furies would come after you if you went against mother right. But in this play, the Orestes, Athena says, I am for the masculine in all things, okay? And she changes the Furies to the benevolent ones, okay? And Orestes gets off. He gets off killing the mother, okay? He gets free. So there is a subtle shift, okay? She's more about civilization. If you think of the goddess, think of the tarot card, the Empress, wild nature. And the Emperor says, I need to control wild nature. So the Emperor is society, okay? I'm going to control wild nature, the goddess, for society, right? Athena is for that. She's the goddess of Athens, right? So even though, and that's why one of the things, a lot of people are talking about the asteroids and stuff, but they're not looking beyond the patriarchal stories of who the goddesses were. These goddesses were different. Like the whole story of Medusa. Medusa was a wisdom goddess who was in the temple and got raped. And the masculine Athena said she's evil and sent some guy off to cut her head off, right? But she wears the Gorgon head on her as a protection, okay? So she kind of knows that she's got to watch out. She wears Zeus's goat skin too, to protect her from being raped by the father. Okay, we're all father's daughters, even if you didn't like your dad. Okay, we're the daughters of patriarchy. We have been trained to be masculine. or to think in a masculine way. And we need to come back and say, no, the masculine is great. Rationality is great. But first I have to trust my instincts, my gut, my heart, my imagination, and then use that wonderful left brain focus and intention to make it so. I always use Captain Picard. He's one of my guys. He would stand there and go, number one, what do you think? Deanna Troy, what do you feel? What are you sensing? And then he'd make a decision. Okay, that's a balanced ego. Okay, but the foundation is always feminine. We all come out of the feminine. The masculine is the dying and rising God. Right? The masculine is the one part of our whole thing that doesn't want to die. And it will kill everything in the world before it will die. I mean, the good part about showing Jesus on the cross is, men, you need to die. Okay, you need to let your ego die so you get reborn in a different way, right? But that's not how they took it. So if we look at things, if we look at the energies, just as yin and yang, it's the yang that has to change. The feminine is eternal. It's always there. But our patriarchal society has used it. Back when I was raising 4 kids as a single mother, my friends would, and I didn't have a lot of money, my friends would say, Kathy, you'd be so great in advertising. And I would say, I would never use my language to try to sell stuff to people that they don't need. Why would you use that, right? But that's what we've done. We've used the imagination to sell things, to control people, to tell a story that isn't true. So the only way back is to find our original connection to the imagination, which when we go out in nature is open up and talk to a tree. Right? That movie I was telling you about, The Seeds of Vandana Shiva, she started off, I missed the beginning, but I think she started off in the Himalayas with women. They were logging all the trees and they were causing mudslides, and the women actually went out and hugged trees. Okay, the original tree huggers. And that's where she learned. She said, it's the people who know things, the people who experience it, okay, who know the truth. We need to go back to the farmers that know the land and the native peoples who know nature, because they experience it. Knowing it in our minds is not good enough. I use a fairy tale. Yes, I am going to use my book if people want to buy it. I'm not going to, shill it for people because that's patriarchal. But if you want to see what I wrote, but, we are father's daughters. So the first step is we need to leave the father's house. And a lot of us have done that already. Like I said, I wrote this 35 years ago, and I published the book 10 years ago, but it's back. Okay. And it's back. And, more and more women especially are saying, I want to learn this. I need to understand what's going on, and I want to live in a different way. And having the goddess as this beautiful image that can help us, right? We can talk to any of the goddesses and use their energy. Like I said, I used Sekhmet to get strong and conscious of myself. I used Morgan Le Fay to learn how to be mysterious and do rituals. We can do that. But on the whole, what we're looking for is wisdom. And it's the thing that our world needs more than ever. Okay, anybody else before I go? Okay, well, I thank you all for coming here and for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. I really don't have like the backup, the help to make me do it in a more professional, maybe. So if you see this video and it ends up not having a picture of me on it, that's just the way it is, but you'll hear what I have to say. And if any of you are interested in joining my class, I would love you to do it. We're going to talk about the archetype of how do we leave the father's house. We're going to talk about how do we engage in the imagination. I am going to be away for the 3rd class in Hawaii with 2 of my sister priestesses, And the third class is on the spring equinox. So we're going to talk about the earth and the cycles of the earth, but we're also going to do a little ritual. And then the last two classes are on understanding and connecting to your archetypal pattern, which the astrological goddess, if you will, that you are aligned with, and how do you get in touch with that? And then the last class is about soul. How do we go through that initiation of soul? It's just a beginning. It's not, I've done this in person where we've danced and smelled things, and, because part of the feminine is being in our senses, right? And our culture totally destroys our senses. We have music 24/7. We have things to watch 24/7. We don't give ourselves a break. I just finished reading the second book of a series that I love, one of my favorite authors, and I couldn't do anything else afterwards. I had to just sit with the story. It was like, yay, a good story, because when we hear a story and it's not that good, we go right away and say, what's the next story? Right? It doesn't fill us. It doesn't inspire us. And so part of it is I want to help women, especially, but men too. How do we be in the moment and hear the story that's going on around us, so that we know, so that we have the wisdom to make the right kind of choices for ourselves in our life? It's not just about, how they say, don't react, you have to respond. Right? And most people just say, well, you have to step back and take 10 breaths. Response means listening to what's really going on, so you have the right response, right? So anyway, if anyone has a question, if not, I thank you all. Have a wonderful day. On Tuesday, I put in the chat this series on astrology and on that Uranus-Pluto, cycle called Changing of the Gods. They're going to show it for free starting on the 22nd, and half an hour every day for 10 days. And I saw the first episode, and it's intelligent, it's well done, and it describes not only astrology, but it gives you, so many of us have left our religious houses, whatever. And I think that's one of the problems with life right now. Young people don't have a bigger story, right? They don't want that story that the church or the synagogue told them, but you can't flounder without, you flounder if you don't have a story. Astrology, at least in this, is saying we're part of this cosmic story that's going on right now. That even though it seems like we're going through hard times and, oh my God, what's going to happen? We're going to die. This is just something that's been happening over and over again since the world began. And we too will get through it. And it gives you a frame of reference. And I think that's why so many, especially young people, are turning to astrology to give their life meaning. So that's a really great one. And then I did put in my dance teacher's website, because right before this, for an hour and a half, I danced around with her on my Zoom link and got myself embodied, even though I don't know if I got Zoom embodied. As soon as I shut off the recording and I recorded, I will see if I'm a little box in the corner with somebody's name in front, or if I actually if people can actually see me talking. And I see people putting something in the chat. Yes. Psyche and Cosmos and Psyche, terrific book, very thick. He was an interesting guy. Some of his interviews have been out there. He talks about how he didn't believe in astrology, and he wrote a book about Western philosophical thought, and all the old philosophers and scientists up until Newton were astrologers. And then he was doing work with Stan Groff, who did psychedelics back in the 60s, and they were wondering why some people had bad trips. Well, as a psychologist, I can say, because they hadn't dealt with some of their shadow issues, but what they found out was the ones who had really bad trips were having a hard astrological connection. And so they were having to deal with the dark part of their psyches or the hard part of their psyches. So he was a very interesting guy, and he's done a lot of work, and he has a school, but his book is thick, but it's easy to read. He talks about not just the Pluto and Uranus cycle, he talks about Neptune. And so he goes over how Neptune influences art and spirituality. So he talks about how, I think it was in the 18 somethings, a big spirituality movement started. And of course, in April, Jupiter and Neptune, the two rulers of Pisces, are meeting up for the first time in I don't know how many years. This is the thing. This is the reason why we know right now is so important. So many cycles are ending and beginning. And to know that, it helps you sort of give a frame of reference to what's going on in your life and where we might possibly go. So this next month, meditate, dance, do art, be imaginative. This is the goddess, okay? The goddess says all rights of love and pleasure are mine. So you know why the Christians and the Muslims didn't like her very much, okay? And turned her into this evil, person, evil thing, evil energy. It's because men have a harder time controlling their instincts than women do. I have 3 sons, so it's not that I don't like men, but we do have to realize what's going on, right? If you look at the tarot card of strength, the woman is holding the lion's mouth down. She's controlling the passions. What do men do? Hercules kills the lion. Okay? When you kill your passion, it's inside yourself and it controls you. Just like right now, we don't realize that the story of Revelation, the apocalypse, has been in our collective unconscious for over 2,000 years. Even if you never heard the book, even if you never went to church and heard it, your ancestors did. Okay? This fear, okay? And it creates fear. It creates, I don't know what's going on. It's the end of the world. It must be us against them. It creates that division, right? But if we take the image of the woman clothed with the sun out of the story and says, watch out, men, we are going to create a new world. And you can send the dragon after me and he's not getting me or getting my kid. Because in the story, she flees to the desert and gets the wings of an eagle, wisdom once again. So, if we are strong in ourselves, if women come back into our power, we will save the world and we will create a better future. I really think, and the Dalai Lama said, the world will be saved by Western women. Okay. And it's because we are father's daughters and our job is to get out of the father's house. Okay. People like Hillary Clinton, they were good, but that's a father's daughter right there. Okay. We need to be the wild gypsy women who run with the wolves. Okay. We need to know that. And yet also present ourselves to the world in ways they can understand us. We don't want to go out with the Maeonides and with Bacchus, Dionysus, and rip people apart and have orgies. That's why I say we really can't go back to the ancient goddesses. We don't have that mindset. Okay, we see the ancient goddesses as in a psychological way. Sekhmet can give me strength. She can make me fierce. We don't worship goddesses in the same way because we don't have the same type of ego consciousness. But we can look at the woman clothed with the sun and connect to her and then instinctually pull in all the different goddess energies, the 10,000, the 10,000 aspects of the goddess, and we can live them, but we can live them in a wise way. Okay. Can we go? Let's do it. I will stop the recording.